week, and I saw a barred owl. That was cool. I saw all these clues, so I knew there was an owl in the woods. I'm going to teach you those clues because they're all around you. And once you figure it out, you'll find that there's owls everywhere. This video's got 5 parts. The first one is I'm going to teach you those tips on how to find an owl in the woods. And then the remainder is I'm going to teach you how to identify the 4 most common owls in North America. The Screech owl, the great horned owl, the barred owl, and the northern saw-whet. And at the end, I'm going to teach you a tip to find an owl that even most birders don't even know about. So stay to the end. Everyone loves the owls. Why do everyone love that? Well, they are secretive. It's like you're entering the world of magic when you see an owl. It's no wonder why Harry Potter chose owls. Every time I see one, I'm in awe, right? I gotta smile the rest of my day. And everyone loves owls. When I put up an owl video on my social media, the response is, 10 times that of a finch or a sparrow. Everyone just, I don't know, they're magical. They're giant eyes. I think the small ones are adorable. The large ones are sometimes terrifying. Anyways, everyone loves owls. So let's just go through them here. There's 19 different owl species that live in North America. And some people go their entire lives without seeing one, unless they go to a zoo or an aviary. But my goal for you is to find your own owls in the woods around your house and around your county. They're there. You just need to know the tips and tricks to find them. So I just want to show first how to find an owl. Now there's really 3 ways to find an owl. One is if you hear them, and the easiest way to hear them is to go outside right before dark. So like the hour or so before dark, that's when the owls start getting active. I know in my area, the barred owls, they really start hunting an hour before sunset. The great horned owls in my backyard, they start hooting a little closer to dusk. So just as the sun sets, it's not dark, but it's getting there. That's when they start hooting. So listen for them. I do owl surveys for our bird observatory, and I drive. You find big woods, and you just go right at dusk or just after, and every mile or so you stop, you roll down the windows, and you listen, and you'll hear them. Barred owls, great horned owls, saw-whets. So A, listen. B is look for their clues. They give you clues. There's 2 pictures here. Mainly they're whitewashed. That's their poop. They usually roost in the same tree every day, or they've got a few of their favorites. So if you can find the tree that they roost in, it's typically a large pine tree. Look for the poop at the bottom, at the base, or at the lower leaves. This is harder to do when it's snowing, but if you can find the roosting sites where they are sitting all day. So that's roosting means they are sitting still all day. Their best camouflage is not moving. That's why you can get pretty close to them, and they're not going to fly away. The other thing to look for, this small picture, is an owl pellet. So owls, they gulp down their meals, so a mouse or a vole, or if they're in the desert, it's a reptile, they'll gulp it down whole. And then their body digests the food, and there's parts of the mouse that they can't digest, namely the bones, the skull, and the hair. And owls create a little pellet of these undigestibles, and they regurgitate it, or they barf it up in this little pellet. And you can find that at the base of the tree. So if you see the whitewash, sometimes you see a pellet, you know for sure there's an owl in the area. And normally it's right above you, and it's just so quiet and perfectly still that it's staring at you and you have no idea. So I teach my students to slowly look up. It'll be in the area. If it's not there today, maybe it'll be there tomorrow. Now, owl pellets, they disintegrate. It takes about a year for them to crumble to nothing. So if you see an owl pellet, you know it's at least within the year. And then fresh ones are you can tell because it's not old, gray, and decaying, but it's a fresh fur and the bones are fresh. And usually, you know, it's been there in the last week or so. So if you don't see it today, try tomorrow. The next thing is you can look for them in the trees. And the owls typically are nearest the tree trunk, and they're about 2/3 of the way up the tree. And it looks like a football shape. So that's a barred owl or a great horned or a long-eared owl. The bigger ones, it looks like a football close to the tree trunk, 2/3 of the way up. Now the saw-whet and the boreal owls, they'll pick a smaller tree, a pine tree, and they're still close to the trunk, but sometimes they're a little further away depending on the size of the branch. But they are motionless, and they're staring right at you. So take your time when you're going through the forest. Look for that whitewash, then look up. So now that you know how to find them, let me tell you what you're looking at. So I'm going to start with the most common owls and then go to the more rare ones at the end. So the most common in North America, we're going to start with the screech owl. Now there's two types of screech owls in North America. We've got the western here on the left and the eastern here on the right. And they're basically identical. Their call is a little different. The western's a little different on their call. But as far as the way they look, in the east, they've got a gray version and a red version. We call them morphs, the red morph and the gray morph. And the same out west, but they don't really have the red morph. They've got in British Columbia, there's a reddish tint, but not like this eastern beautiful red. Now the screech owls, they're cavity dwellers. They don't make holes, but they live in the holes. So they'll find a hole that's naturally made by the tree or one that a woodpecker had made and vacated. They also are the ones that will sleep if you put a wooden owl box up in the woods behind your house. They'll find it. They'll make it their own. So the trick for finding screech owls is they look for a hole that's about 10 to 20 feet up. And the hole's facing south or west. So they want that to face the sun. Out of the north wind, but facing the sun in the wintertime. It's kind of a natural alarm clock. The sun pokes its head through the hole, and then the owl wants to go and sunbathe out of the hole. So that's where most people see them. And you'll hear them at night when they're calling, and they sound like a horse whinnying in the night. So it's got a trill that's descending down. So that's the screech owl. And then they'll have a monotone call as well, a horse that's monotone. So look for the screech owl, or put a box in your backyard. Maybe the last thing to tell you about them is where in the country are they? And they're pretty much everywhere, but it's the Rocky Mountains that divides western from eastern screech. So on the east side of the Rockies is the eastern screech owl. The western side of the Rockies, it's the western. So do you really need to know the difference in the call? Just depending on where you are in the country, that's going to be the owl you're seeing. It's just based on location as well. Next owl is the great horned owl. Now, this is the traditional Whoo! Whoo! This great horned owl is all over North America. It's a large owl. They are up in a nest, so they're up high up in a tree, not really in a cavity, and it's aptly named great horned. Look at those ear tufts; they do look like two horns coming out. And on the great horned owl, the hooting, typically what you'll hear is called a duetting, where the male and the female are calling back and forth, and they sound similar. They both are going whoo, whoo, but usually the female goes first, and it's a little bit higher pitched than the male. So listen out for the female going and then the male responding. And that's a pair that's mating for life there. And they're calling back and forth. And then if you're lucky enough to have a nesting pair in your area, you'll hear the children, the juveniles, begging for food constantly after they're born. And it sounds like it's a high-pitched, like every 30 seconds they're, mom and dad are out hunting and they're in the nest begging for their food, and you hear them quiet up once mom and dad brings them back a meal. So it's a fun pair of owls to catch up with. We had a pair in our backyard every year, and when the juveniles fledged, having I think 3 or 4 in the area all around us the day they left the nest was pretty special. The next big one that's common is the barred owl. The barred owl, the first thing you notice there are those black eyes. So that's the only big owl in North America with black eyes. Like, look at the great horned yellow eyes. Screech owl have the yellow eyes. But if it's an all black eye, like a giant marble, it's a barred owl. Now the only other one that's dark-eyed is a spotted owl, but they are very rare. We're not even going to talk about their spotted owls of the Pacific Northwest. There's just a few remaining, but the barred owl is the big one that you're going to see there, and it's most of all of the East Coast, eastern U.S., up into Canada, and then into Oregon and Washington. Not a lot of barred owls over the Rocky Mountains, but they're mostly eastern U.S. and tons in the South. They love swamps, marshes, old forests, and what you'll see here is you'll see them during the day, and they'll be on an exposed branch of a tree and just sitting there quiet all day. And then it starts hunting about an hour before sunset. And their call is something you've probably heard, but maybe didn't know what it was. So their mnemonic is, who cooks for you all? And it sounds like this. So that is what you're hearing, and it's nearby, right? You can hear that call about a kilometer away. So when you're out driving, you might hear that. If you're out walking kind of in a swampy area, listen out for that call. They're predators. They eat the small owls, the northern saw-whets. So it's kind of owl on owl crime there. And this is what they're eating, the northern saw-whet owl. It's a highly migratory small owl, like the most adorable thing you've ever seen. But they are vicious hunters. They eat mice like all the other owls, but because they're small size, they can only eat half a mouse at a time. So if you ever see a half a mouse, well, a northern saw-whet is going to finish it later tonight. And so because they're highly migratory, during the fall or in the spring when they're on the move is the best time to find them. And listen out for their call. It sounds like a little kid playing a recorder, one of those flutes you learned in grade 4. high-pitched toots. Toot, 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 toot. Almost like a beeping sound, but it's a high-pitched toot every few seconds. And look for the white here on the face there. It looks, to me, it reminds me of the flux capacitor on the Back to the Future DeLorean car.
This is what makes time travel possible. The flux capacitor.
Flux capacitor.
Like that triangle that goes all three directions. And I'm gonna show you that later on when we look at the boreal owl versus the saw-whet. But you're gonna see that white triangle, the flux capacitor. And just the last thing on the saw-whet is it's only about 8 inches tall, so it's really small, much smaller than the barred owls, which are 3 feet. This is less than a foot tall.
Did you know barred owls don't migrate? That's right, they stay in the same square mile all year round. So if somebody tells you they saw an owl, or if you've seen one before, go back to that spot because it won't stray very far from there. If you've found an owl in the woods, please share it in the comments, or if better yet, my tips led you to find an owl, I'd love to hear it in the comments. Also, subscribe so that you're the first to know when my next bird ID video comes out, and most importantly, when part 2 of this video comes out, which is the rest of the owls of North America.